So thank you very much for lasting out till it's been a long day, right? Yeah, but some of you look awake. They're giving you a lot of coffee. That's the main thing. That's the important thing. Coffee and nice cakes and sugar and stuff like that to keep you going. I was thinking, have been coming to Cambridge days for a long time. I've been coming to Brazil for 20 years. And when actually Leo and Sergio asked me, what are you going to talk about? We're inviting you back again. I was delighted to be invited back again. But I thought, what should I talk about this time? You know, have I got any more ideas up my sleeve? I realized that I had been coming to this country for 20 years. Exactly 20 years, almost. I arrived in September 2005. I'm going to tell you the story of the last 20 years, hopefully in 42 minutes. I'm going to do it through 5 different quotations, five things people have said to me. In fact, the last one, no, it's a literary quotation, but the other 4 of the 5 are things people have said to me in the last 20 years, 2 of them actually here in Brazil. And I've used these quotations as a kind of thread through the talk to focus on those topics, the foundations that Michael was talking about, that actually haven't changed in 20 years. You know, a lot of people with vested interests are telling you that you have to do this, you have to innovate. It's a word I kind of dislike intensely because they have, as I said, vested interests, edge tech, now it's AI and so on. I'm not saying this is not unimportant, it is important, but there are key foundational, let's say, key pedagogical topics and issues which have not changed in 20 years. And I wanted to look back at what I'd been doing and see what those were. So that's what this journey is about. Okay, are we ready? Okay, so here we go. It started here. This was my first IATEFL. I attend, you know the IATEFL conference? Have any of you been to the IATEFL conference? Lucky enough to go to in the UK. This was the first, I was 38 years old, so you can work out how ancient I am now. And I went to this conference. I was extremely nervous. I'd never had to give a big talk. I was being sponsored by a publisher for the first time. I had a book about to be published in the following year. And I met a guy there who was working for that publisher called Paul Berry. Some of you may know him or heard of him. I gave my talk, and he came up to me after my talk, and he said to me, yeah, would you like to come to Brazil? I realize I'm not very far away from these people. Hello. And have you got 2 months free to come to Brazil? I was thinking, 2 months? That's a long time. And he said, it's a very big country. Okay, it's not really like a country, it's like a continent. And I said, yeah, I thought about it, and I thought, I didn't know anything about Brazil. I loved Brazilian music. Caetano Veloso and MPB. And I thought, oh yeah, I'll go to Brazil. I've never been to Latin America before. And I thought, 2 months in Brazil? I thought, we'll have a holiday before, and I'll get to know the country. So this is the story. A year later, the book was published, and I went. Before that, I actually studied. I thought, I don't want to just speak Portuñol. I live in Barcelona, in Spain, so I could, hablo español bastante bien. And I thought, okay, I could go to Brazil and I could, speak Portuñol to everybody. And then I thought, actually, I don't want to do that. I really would like to learn a little bit of Portuguese. So I went to the Centro Cultural do Brasil in Barcelona. Can you imagine what a beautiful building that is in? It's this incredible building next to the Casa Batlló, which is one of the most famous buildings in Barcelona. And they occupy those 3 little windows at the top there. And I have to say that the course was not very good. It was a lot of passive voice. It was very grammar-oriented. There was nothing wrong with it, but I thought, it gave me the basics. It gave me a lot of things about, I realized that ciudad was cidade, and things like that. The pronunciation was important, but I didn't really learn very much that was very helpful. It just gave me the basics. And then I arrived a month later. I did this intensive course in the summer of 2005, and then I went and arrived in, of course, like all the gringos, have to arrive in Rio de Janeiro, right? So I arrived in Rio de Janeiro, and the first thing, this is a photo I took in September 2005, 20 years ago, was I arrived in the airport, Galeão, but of course Galeão is called Tom Jobim as well, Jobim. And I loved this song, Samba de Avião. I guess you know it. And I just thought, this is a great country. If the first thing you see when you arrive at the airport are the lyrics of this song, I thought, I'm going to like it here. And I arrived, and that was the view. This is the photo I took 20 years ago from my hotel on Copacabana, which is probably the first photograph that many people take when they first. I realized very soon that wasn't Brazil. That was just one part of Brazil. But that's the part that the gringo sees when they arrive. And then very rapidly, I began to learn Portuguese properly. How did I learn Portuguese properly? Good spoken language. How do you do that? With a notebook. That's my notebook. So there's no passive voice there. So I was in a cafe. I was with this wonderful person called Cynthia, who was from Minas Gerais. We were in Belo Horizonte. And you know that Minas accent? So I was saying, how do I order a coffee? How do I order the bill? I love coffee. I'm in Brazil. How do I do it? And so she was saying, me vê cafezinho. I mean, it was just, the way she spoke Portuguese was so seductive. Faz notinha pra gente, no? I thought, that's just page number 1 of my little notebook of Portuguese. And I've still got it to this day, and it kind of brings tears to my eyes sometimes, looking back at that time. But I realized, this was how we would learn through conversation, something that Olha mentioned, dialogue, learning through dialogue, learning incidentally, listening. Obviously, I was lucky enough. I was in situ, right? Students have that exposure. But I realized that was an effective way to learn basic interactional, transactional Portuguese. And then I went to very far away. They sent me to, where do you think they sent me to? In Brazil. Where was after Rio, the first place they sent me to? No. I could not believe it. Sao Paulo, no. Salvador, no. No, I was in Minas with Cynthia, but the next place they sent me to, Manaus. Can you believe being in Manaus for the first time? That heat. And this is not a photo I took. This comes from Getty Images, as you can see. But I was fascinated by this, O Encontro das Águas, no? The meeting of the waters, where the Rio Negro meets the Solimões. No? And it's this have you ever been there? Go there. It's an incredible experience to see this meeting of the one. And then I thought, oh, this is interesting, because I went back to Rio and I saw, this symbol here along the, what do they call it? The calçadão. No? No, what's it called? No, the pavement, yeah. The promenade is the symbol of the meeting of the waters, that black and white. And you still see it, don't you, everywhere. Burle Marx, he made this design to symbolize. But actually, the very first mosaic of this type is in Manaus. The first one was 1900, if you're interested in that kind of thing. Anyway, in Manaus is my first anecdote. The first quotation comes from Manaus. I had my book with me. I was very proud of it. It's my first book. I was very interested in getting students to talk about world culture, intercultural awareness. That was my big thing. That was what I was talking about 20 years ago. Yeah? English as a lingua franca. You know that kind of thing? Yeah. It was kind of new then. Now it's not new. But 20 years ago, it was kind of new. I wanted people using the book to talk about their culture in English. That's the essence of intercultural awareness. And I wanted to make the content of the book sort of relevant to the students. I didn't want there just to be Anglo-American culture, right? That was distant from the students' lives. There I am in Manaus. I walk into a classroom and I show the book. I go on and on, doing, selling, trying to sell the book to the teacher and talking about this. And I showed the woman there, I thought, what shall I show? What unit shall I show? So I showed her the unit about food. Everybody likes food. And I said, there's all this exotic food, different kinds of food here. And she looked at me and she said, she pointed to the photo of the strawberry and she said, the thing is, we don't have strawberries here. And I was thinking, you don't have strawberries? That's the Lexis of food, yeah, fruit. What fruit do you have? Apples and strawberries and maybe an orange, banana, maybe. But in Manaus, they have bananas. But in Manaus, yeah, if you want to buy a strawberry, it's going to be very expensive, okay? And I suddenly thought, it's such a strange throwaway kind of comment, but I thought, oh my God, she's right. Like, I am only thinking about, when I think about culture, I'm just thinking about, not having photographs of the Statue of Liberty. I hadn't thought about the Lexis. I hadn't thought that the Lexis, the vocabulary, actually is culture bound as well. So I thought, it was me with my international book, and I thought, oh no. So I decided, yeah, okay, so this is global. People eat strawberries in many parts of the world. And what do people eat in Manaus? Yeah, papaya and mango and bananas. And I said, what you need to do is, the students have to create a personal lexicon, yeah? What is relevant to them in their lives? And that's what you should bring out, so that you localize the vocabulary. And that is a photo I took in Manaus. It's the most incredible place. I mean, I don't know if it still looks like that. That's the photo I took. So, yeah, talking about strawberries in Manaus doesn't really make much sense. You see what I'm trying to get at? I had a Western perspective of what the most important fruit was, but there it wasn't important. It wasn't relevant to them. And it hadn't occurred to me. And that was a very impactful moment. And interestingly, the book was called Framework, and I was fighting a losing battle. The book was, can you believe, it didn't have this cover, but then they made a Greek edition of it, and they put Tower Bridge on it. And they filled the book. They made an adaptation of my book. And they filled it with Anglo culture, British culture, which I didn't want. So not everybody agreed with me. I was trying to do something different, but they were fighting against that. No. People who study English, they want to know about British and American culture. But that's not how it is today, is it? If we just have those cultural elements in the book, we are saying that is the dominant culture that you and your students have to adopt. And that isn't very inclusive. And of course, now things have changed 20 years later, and this is the second edition of Evolve that will come out in 2026. I don't know if any of you used Evolve. I've met some people who are using it. And here we have, Brazilian culture. We have Havaianas, which is obviously a well-known brand, and we feature that. But that's something that's happened in 20 years. Look at the difference between that and that. And that's how things have changed in 20 years. At the same time, Cambridge published this book, which was a seminal academic textbook at the time, Critical Pedagogies and Language Learning. Here are some of the great minds in second language acquisition and English ELT, EFL. And I suddenly began to be really interested in critical perspectives. And reading this now, it reminds me of what we're talking about today in terms of inclusion, yeah? Language education requires commitment to social transformation, justice, and equality. Well, that is very similar to what we now call inclusion, yeah? So what I'm trying to say is that a lot of things seem new, but it's a new way of framing things. But actually, these are things that we've been talking about for a long time. And the critical perspective was fascinating to me. And this is something we've heard a lot from other speakers today, that language is not simply a means of expression or communication. It is a practice that constructs and is constructed by the way language learners understand themselves, their social surroundings. So I suddenly thought, yes, this is right. This makes total sense to me. And I thought, how can I get students to how can we create tasks that bear in mind the social surroundings? And another interesting, at this time, Scott Thornberry, who we've heard quoted in other speakers have quoted him today, he referred to the ecological perspective in his A to Z of ELT. And again, it's the same message framed in a different way. He talks about the linguistic ecosystem, that language and language learning should be seen in its social and cultural contexts. I thought, what kind of activities can we do to embrace this idea? The other day, I was in the Cambridge office, and I saw this wonderful book, the Book of Sao Paulo. And this is, I'm going to read you a little bit of it, because it just fits so well with this whole idea of, let me see, it's difficult. Difficult to hold everything. So this very connects with what Olha was talking about, because this is written by teenagers. This is the book. Sorry, I'm kind of conscious I'm not seeing you people. It's written by teenagers for adults. It goes like this. It talks about Sao Paulo. It says, Sao Paulo is a tumultuous city. It is a city that never sleeps. It is a place of diversity and pollution and noise. It can be a depressive city, bear with me, a sad city, a stressful place where people don't pay attention to each other. It is an overcrowded place where people work a lot, too much, a commercial city. But Sao Paulo is also so fun, and there are so many things to do. It is a city of so many people, different kinds of places. It is a place of discovery, and actually, we love it here. It's not good. And this is a book that Cambridge published in partnership with the Cultura Inglesa. It's a wonderful book. And it echoes so well what an idea I had years ago, which was this, to create, oh yes, you don't want to see that, to create do you remember years in one of the first digital tools was a mosaic maker? Do you remember that? I loved it. You get all your photographs from your computer or your phone, and you just put them all, you downloaded this tool, and they created this really nice mosaic. That's like, 15 years ago. Now we can do all kinds of amazing things. But I had an idea. I said to teachers, I was doing some teacher training here in Sao Paulo, and I said, create your mosaic of Sao Paulo. What would you, in actual fact, this is what they say in the book. They actually say, what would be in your book of Sao Paulo? And this is what the teachers had to create their mosaic, and they had to explain why they chose those images. So what would be in your mosaic of Sao Paulo? You don't have to answer all together. You can think about it and reflect on it. But this is one example that I really liked. I know you might not be Corinthians fans, sorry. Tá bom ou não? Okay. Minha vida. And I asked her to explain why are these things your Sao Paulo. And of course, some of them are typical. Some of them are emblematic. They are buildings. There's the famous cod, bacalhau, pastel de bacalhau. I queued up in the mercado, oh my God, for like 2 hours for one of them. And so but then I said, what's that photo? What about this one? He said, oh yeah, the graffiti, some of it is really good and some of it is terrible. But graffiti is everywhere in Sao Paulo. And then I said, what about that one, the photo at the top? He said, yeah, that's flying into Congonhas. It's terrifying. That is an image that has to be shown of Sao Paulo. What I mean is that this is looking at a familiar world in an unfamiliar way. And another great book published around that time, 2010, was this book on intercultural language activities. And I like what John Corbett says here. It's a great book. He was based in Brazil, in fact. I don't know if he still is. He says this, one way of encouraging respect for the unfamiliar is to make the familiar strange by decentering one's perspective of one's own culture. That is a great thing to do. Make the familiar unfamiliar. Challenge stereotypes. Again, this is very inclusive. Challenge stereotypes of your culture, of your city. That's exactly what this book does as well. It challenges the typical, let's say, associations of Sao Paulo. So that's the first story. Second story. You've had enough coffee, no? If I was doing this in the morning, you might think, an espresso now. I've had a bit of a strange career. I went from being a teacher quite quickly to being a writer. But I did have a brief time of teacher training CELTA, students doing CELTA. And one day, I was doing a class, and this teacher, I said, how did the class go? How was it? I was observing the class, and the teacher said to me, the best moment for me is the coffee break. And I thought, okay, that's not what I really wanted you to say. But why do you think this comment made an impact on me? I think what this teacher was trying to say was many things. In this one quotation, there are so many things that this person is trying to say. One of them is to do with roles. When you're in the coffee break with your student, when you're learning to be a teacher, right? At the beginning, that's difficult to have the authority, no? And when you're in the coffee break, chatting is somehow easier, no? You're on a similar level to your students. But he was also talking about language. And he said that, and this is something that's cropped up quite a lot today in the different presentations, the idea of incidental learning, that you can learn through conversation. And that was surprising to him, that he was having these conversations in English, and somehow that was kind of more effective than his over-planned lessons, where he had all these objectives that he had to fulfill, but he didn't fulfill them. He was frustrated. It was easier in the coffee break. And I sort of empathized with him. And this is this dialogic pedagogy, and Olha mentioned this. And this is a beautiful quotation. Can you guess who said this? If you read it, you might guess, because it's a Brazilian. Dialogue is the sealing together of the teacher and the students in the joint act of knowing and re-knowing the object of study. It has to be Paulo Freire, yeah? A pedagogy for liberation. And of course, you see what I mean? He brings the two things together. He talks about a dialogic pedagogy, but he also talks about the role of the teacher and the student becoming more equal, which was one of his great tenets, no? And of course, this links with Dogme and Teaching Unplugged. 2009, Scott Thornberry, Luke Meddings, I don't know if you know about the movement, that it's coming back again, it's coming back in fashion. They started this concept of Teaching Unplugged. And Teaching Unplugged, very quickly, was based on this. That's why it's related to the coffee quotation. Conversation-driven. Learning should be conversation-driven, should be driven by dialogue, implicit learning or incidental learning, and most importantly, perhaps, emergent language. In other words, what we, certainly in terms of teaching adults, which is my experience, you realize after a while that what you teach your students is not exactly what they learn, right? And why is that? That's because teaching a language is not like teaching a subject. People learn things incidentally, almost in spite of you sometimes. And they learn things. The idea of emergent language is a very powerful concept. Instead of target language, the language you have in your book that you're meant to focus on in the class, let's focus on what emerges from what the students say. And it's become back in fashion again. That's all these QR codes will take you to these books. And the latest one is, emergent language at the point. I went to an incredibly moving talk by Hugh Della at IATEFL this year, where he spoke about teaching Ukrainian teachers online. Now, if there is not a better example of emergent language, it's not this. This has to be the best, although maybe the saddest example. So he has created a book called English in Time of War. And what it is a series of anecdotes or observations of what the teachers wanted to say about the situation they were in. And it's extremely, as I said, extremely moving. But it's a perfect example of the power of emergent language. None of these teachers would have imagined having to say these things in English. And what Hugh does is is an art to teaching with emergent language. The idea is that you reformulate, you listen to what the teachers are saying, you listen to what the students are saying, and you attempt to reformulate them. Here are some examples from that book. And this language in bold is the new language, the language emerging from the teacher's dialogue, yeah? People are still managing to go about their daily lives despite the war. Every time the sirens go off, we have to head down to the basement and hide out. It's weird what you can get used to. And emergent language, there's a great book I highly recommend called Working with Emergent Language. And again, it's these three central ideas that we don't drive. We don't drive everything in class, that the learners drive it, at least part of it. Learner-driven moments is important in the classroom, that they have agency. And this is also very important, focusing on learning opportunities and not only outcomes. So outcomes are important, and we've heard about that today. But if you only focus on outcomes, you're not going to be surprised. These are the objectives. These are the outcomes, right? This is the target language. I am in control. No, that's not what teaching is about. The great thing about teaching is that the learners surprise you. Isn't that great? The learners surprise you. And that's what makes teaching language so wonderful. But you've got to allow them opportunities to do that. And if you focus only on outcomes, they haven't got the freedom to do that. You've got to allow speaking activities for students to discover things for themselves and give them the opportunity to learn from each other. So that's the language, the coffee break anecdote. The third one. You know who she is? Okay, so this is very personal. This is a much more personal quotation. One day I was at home making dinner, and my husband, Danny, he said to me, "You know, I want to ask you something." He said, "Ben, be honest with me. Do I sound like Sofia Vergara when I speak English?" And I said, "Danny, what do you mean by that?" And what are you saying about Sofia Vergara's English? You know who Sofia Vergara is, right? Yeah, I hope so. We were addicted to Modern Family, the series. We watched it a lot. And of course, she has a very, very strong accent. It's very exuberant personality. But have you seen that recently she's been in the news quite a lot? Have you seen? Well, things like this. So she has spoken recently about being stereotyped, of struggling to really get on in Hollywood because she's always stereotyped as the exuberant Latina, right? In a possibly negative stereotype. She's not taken seriously. And here's a little interview that she gave, well, not an interview, this is a little clip of a video. Just count how many film stars, female film stars, can you see in this clip along with Sofia Vergara. And listen to what Sofia Vergara says about her English.
Accent away, no matter what. I tried. Like at the beginning of my career, I'm like, I cannot, when I moved to LA, I'm like, I cannot believe why Penelope Cruz or Salma Hayek don't change their accent. They're going to have so much more opportunities. I'm going to do it. Of course, it's like I spend so much more.
Oh, we can't hear. Oh.
Sorry.
You can curse.
With people teaching me how to, it was a waste of my time.
I don't think we can hear that very well. I'm sorry about that. Well, she's basically there in a room with Naomi Watts and Jodie Foster and Nicole Kidman and Jennifer Aniston. And she's talking about how her accent limits her in Hollywood. So she's always given these roles. And I look back to that's what I was talking about in 2015. I was talking about language and identity. And these are the questions I asked teachers then in 2015. How do you want to come across when you speak English? I want to sound like a native speaker or even be mistaken for one. I want people to know where I'm from, so I'm happy to have a marked accent. I simply want to be intelligible. I prefer to have a neutral accent so nobody could identify where I'm from. And that was one of the most powerful 3 questions I ever asked any teachers, because when I asked that, you don't have to answer that question now, and of course there's no correct answer, but when I asked those questions in 2015, it was literally split down the middle. There was 33% who said 1, 33% who said 2, and 33.3% who said 3. I thought, oh, well, I've touched on something important here. And of course, in the next 10 years, this has become maybe less of an issue. And what Alberto was talking about in terms of evaluating spoken English is that accent is no longer an issue as long as you are intelligible internationally. But it was a big thing 10 years ago still. And Danny did not want to sound like what he thought was a kind of, he had a negative impression of how Sofia Vergara spoke. He didn't want to be the exuberant Latino speaking English. And I said, well, you're going to have an accent. That's your voice, right? It's like me. I speak Spanish. Hablo español. Llevo 34 años en España. Mira el acento que tengo. Tengo mucho acento. Does it matter? No, it used to matter to me, but I realized it doesn't matter. So this is another big issue, identity in the language learner. And basically in the next 10 years, we've shifted the norm from the L1 speaker, the native speaker, to the successful user. And we're beginning to allow learners to develop their own voice. If change is going on in assessment at Cambridge, this is very positive in that respect. Because otherwise we're just going to, as I said, create, again, this is not inclusive to say you have to sound like native speaker. It's not even useful to sound like a native speaker in today's world. It actually can be counterproductive. So we need to reflect on voice and persona and class, develop critical awareness, i.e. cultural stereotypes, and represent sympathetic and contemporary role models. So a very good idea is to go online and find celebrities. So Sofia Vergara is one. Football players are really good. They often have to speak English, and hear how they have improved their English. These are very sympathetic, accessible role models for students. Here's a nice example. I haven't got time to play you because I'm aware of the time ticking away in front of me. But this is a great TikTok video, La evolución del inglés de Moisés Caicedo. Moisés Caicedo is an Ecuadorian player, plays for my football team, which is, thank you, Chelsea. Winners of the World Cup, or whatever it's called, amazingly. And it's a really beautiful video. It's a TikTok video. Someone's taken all the different interviews that Caicedo has done and see how his English has improved. And it's a very, this kind of material is really good to show students.
La evolución del...
No tengo tiempo. No tenho tempo. Tenho 10 minutos. So many. In Evolve, one of the nicest things about Evolve is this focus on real students. So we have in the book, we have these real students. Here we have somebody from Brazil, Casa Thomas Jefferson. We have people from Japan, from Thailand, from Mexico. This exposes your students to real English from different countries, and again represents positive role models, accessible role models for your students. So we've had 3 stories, 2 stories to go, right? Quotations. Now, here's another one from Brazil. And this one, if you came to see me 2 or 3 years ago, you might remember this anecdote. So this is, do you remember? Yeah. So this is Juan Lopez. This is a teacher I met here in Sao Paulo, in Brastisol. This was the first Brastisol after the pandemic. I met him, and we had we went to a workshop, and after the workshop, he started talking to me about his teaching during the pandemic. And this is the quotation. He says, I think we need to be a little more vulnerable with our students. Where does this quotation come from? Well, he talks about a moment when he was teaching English during the pandemic and with adult students online. And this is I'm just going to let you read it while I drink some water. So just imagine you're teaching in Zoom and then you have this experience. This liberating moment that he talks about, it was so moving that And I also found it incredible. He was able to perceive this online. He was able to sense this online. It's a bit like the trauma that Ukrainians are going through, right? In a way, the point of need. Like, I don't want to teach page 92. There's something, this is too important to ignore. It's much more important to talk about what's happening. And we're all going through this trauma together. This affected me enormously. It's made a huge impact on me. And it made me realize that we are so much more than just teachers. Because here, he's forging a strong emotional connection with his students. And this is, again, Scott Thornberry from his A to Z, that our role as teachers, this pastoral role, is very important. This idea that we are just participants in the classroom ecology. This is a very powerful idea. Breaking down the barrier, like Freire would approve, breaking down the barrier between teacher and student. And this care for the learner's emotional well-being is very important, became very important in the pandemic. He wrote this years ago, but it became important at that time. You see what I mean? And again, Philip Kerr from his book 30 Trends, he talks about well-being. And in the last 5 years, 10 years, the whole issue of well-being, social emotional skills have become something on the agenda. And I like this quotation very much. He says, many of the ways in which personal well-being can be enhanced is by addressing the issues with colleagues, by sharing and caring with others. And it's much better to do that together than alone. This idea of developing empathy, caring for and caring with our learners. When we understand what caring for our learners is, but caring with them is somehow more intimate. You have to be more vulnerable. Now, I'm not suggesting that our lessons become therapy sessions, right? No, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that we need to get to know our students as people. And we shouldn't be afraid of that, of being vulnerable in a given moment. Developing these strong interpersonal relationships is important. So we've heard this as well today in other sessions, but this idea of the motivator, the guide, the coach is something which is now, I say newer, now these are the traditional roles that are no longer so established and ones that are becoming more important. The more we teach social emotional skills, what used to be called soft skills, we don't call them soft skills anymore, because soft sounds unimportant. They're not soft. They're hard, they're important. That, of course, is something very much on the agenda now. And there's a lot, the competencies that Michael spoke about as well are Cambridge's response to that, the learner competencies. So, I'm a race against time here. I shall move fast through this, but these are the positives from the pandemic, I think. I'm not saying this was true of everybody. I think many people did forge stronger connections with students, and there was an increased awareness of students as people and the need for empathy, a greater interest in well-being and inclusion, a greater sense of community and belonging. Community is the key word. What to use my papa, Lucia at the beginning. Remember? 9 o'clock's a long time ago, isn't it? Do you remember? She said, community is the important thing. That's why we're all here today. And that is our goal, to foster belonging and community. And that brings me to the final quote. And this is not I didn't have the pleasure of meeting this woman, and now I can't because she's no longer here. But she wrote a beautiful book. It's actually a lecture from 2016, which actually coincided with Trump becoming president for the first time. She said this, this is Toni Morrison, why should we want to close the distance when it's easier to close the gate? What she's trying to say is, why should we get to know the other when it's easier to shut the other out? It comes from this wonderful book, The Origin of Others. That's the full quotation. And this, for me, is the most profound quote for me today, because my interest is now in inclusion. This was written at a particular moment when she felt that the world was going in the wrong direction, and when people are all too happy to ignore the other and actually persecute the other, which is what we're seeing today. And this is my book. I quote her in this book, which will be out next month. And that quotation is in the introduction. If you want to download a 20-page extract of the book, feel free to grab that QR code. Published in 3 weeks' time. And this is my, as I said, the field I'm working on now, inclusion. And my take on inclusion is, well, actually, we go back to some of the things that we were looking at 20 years ago. A lot of people try to tell you teaching inclusively is a challenge. Yeah, it can be a challenge, but we shouldn't mystify it. A lot of what we do in class already is inclusive. Developing empathy, offering choice, maximizing participation. All these things are inclusive teaching strategies. So there's a lot of people telling you've got to change your methodology. That's not what it's about. And I think there's something wrong with the label inclusion. How do we? Is it DEI? Is it EDI? Is it JEDI? The J for justice? Or EDIB, the B for belonging? These are the the three concepts of inclusion: equity, equality, diversity, and inclusion. And that's how I define it in the book. But inclusion is a complicated term. Because to include, you have to kind of bestow that on others, right? It suggests that somebody in a dominant position is including somebody else. In order to include, you maybe have to exclude. So I think this is the reason we have problems with this term and why it's become so politicized recently. So I prefer belonging. This is the need for social connection and identification. This is the perfect context. A sense of belonging. We all know what it feels like to belong, right? It's not a declared end state, but an ongoing practice. And I think importantly, it is not bestowed by a dominant group, but emerges from meaningful contribution to a group. Now, it's a bit heavy at 6 o'clock in the evening, but I think it's important. Maybe it's just a question of labeling a nomenclature, but I think the term belonging is important to foster more than inclusion today. Holistic approach to inclusion suggests that barriers to learning are reduced when methodology and materials are designed to account for this variability. It must be seen as beneficial to all. So it's not about individuals, it's about the group. That's what being inclusive is about. And relatedness, the need to feel connected and belong, should be our end goal. Inclusion is about wanting others to be their true selves around you. And that idea of true self is what I'm going to finish with. I've got 27 seconds, but bear with me. This is the end. OECD definition is what I think is great. Because we associate inclusion with special educational needs and the individual. And I don't think that is any longer as relevant. More than a particular policy or practice related to a specific group, whether those are gays or disabled people or refugees. No. This definition identifies an ethos of inclusion and communities of learners, which does not only involve an individual dimension, but a communal one. It's exactly what we heard at the beginning this morning, all those hours ago, the need for community. So concluding thoughts, and I know I'm out of time, just bear with me a couple of minutes. Remember the 5 quotations, yeah? They all kind of overlap, actually. They all trace a story of things I've been talking about over the years. Over the last 20 years, they all were impactful moments for me, but they all kind of relate to each other. So you've got culture, language, identity, the roles, inclusion. You could define it like this. These 5, for me, this is a personal journey. These 5 big topics are the things that I still think are relevant. They were relevant then, they're still relevant today. And what brings those 5 together what are the 3 things that bring those 5 big issues in language teaching together? I think there are 3. I think agency, giving the learners a voice, empathy, the sense of connection, and maybe the most important of all, true self. And I would say, you realize looking back that some things never change. Some things shouldn't change. And I would say these are the things related to those 3. I would say, if after this talk, this is the message I want to leave with you. Allow your learners agency. Let them develop their own voice as best you can. Introduce content which encourages an empathic response. Share something meaningful that has value. Like this story for me. That has value for me, but I hope for you too. And be fully present in your class. Be your true self, and your learners will be too. And that's me in Manaus. Encontro das Águas. Much more handsome, but still. What can you do? Many thanks. Muito obrigado.
Well done.
Thank you. I've got one more slide. Can I show it? Leo gave me permission to show this slide. Where is Leonardo?
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he did. Just a little plug for me. I'm giving a course on inclusion at the International Teacher Development Institute, who have allowed me. It's a 6-week course. It's at 1 day every 6 weeks. Read the book and we talk about it and, well, have fun, hopefully, and learn lots of things. If you're interested, there's a discount for Cambridge Day Brazil participants and those of you online. So if you're interested, feel free to capture the QR code and, look forward to seeing you on the course if you're interested. Thanks very much.
I got it.
Yeah.
Can you walk with me? We have a couple of questions for you.
I'm sorry I went over time, but I had a lot to talk about.
We've privileged this side too much. We're going to spend some time with these people over here. Hi, everybody.
I can't do it, but I'll show you later. I'm sorry I didn't come over here much.
That's okay.
Now I can see you.
Yeah.
It's a very big room. I understand why Graham was running around this morning.
All right, so we have a couple of questions for you. If anybody in the audience has a question, please raise your hand and a microphone will get to you. Someone here in the front, Sergio, if you want to get it. But while we wait for the folks here, we're going to do it with the folks online. It's a good one. So, Belzi, from São José do Rio Preto, says, what do you think teachers should focus on most as we look to the future of language education?
Well, I think that final message. I think, I do think it's so valuable to look back in order to look forward. And I feel that we are often manipulated, especially by education tech people, as I said at the beginning, with vested interests in EdTech, saying you need to do this, you need to adopt that, you need to innovate. Well, actually, what I'm mentioning there, what I was talking about there, a lot of things haven't changed. So I would say to her, well, those, giving your students a voice, giving them agency, these are very human qualities. Yeah. Being yourself, it sounds easy, but it's not that easy. Having that confidence and having that sense of trust with your students, this is not something that is easy to achieve. I'm not saying it is. But all I'm saying is if you achieve it, you will see an enormous difference in the way your students respond to you. So I think those 3 things, I would say to her, those things which are kind of essential, vital in teaching, in pedagogy, language pedagogy, have not fundamentally changed.
Right.
I would be wary of having to adopt something new because it has a new label or a new acronym or something like that.
Right.
I would be suspicious of that. I'm critical of it.
Good. There's an expression in Portuguese
Sim.
that we say that arroz com feijão funciona.
Sim.
So rice and beans works, yeah? Keep it simple, keep it basic.
I think actually what you just said, excuse me, what you said about feijão.
Yeah.
Feijão.
Feijão.
That would, yeah. Do beans appear in your book in A1 level? And you see, it's the same story as with the strawberry. You know, that's the thing, arroz e feijão. Yeah, those are the important things in life. We need to talk about them from day one of class. So it's, yeah, thank you for what's the quotation again? Arroz e feijão?
Funciona.
Funciona.
Works.
Acho que sim.
Yeah. Keep it simple, basic. Rice and beans
simple.
work, yeah. All right. Questions from the audience? Oh, Sergio, over here. She had her hand raised for. No, that one here. Oh, okay, afterwards. Perfect. Thank you, Sergio.
Hi, Ben. Thank you for the incredible talk. It was amazing. Hi.
Thank you. There you are. Yeah.
Currently, I teach little kids. I teach 5, 6-year-olds. And it's been amazing because they come up with questions that I would never know the answer.
Oh, really?
The hardest questions. This is a school that works with equity and inclusion, and they have this, social emotional background that's quite interesting. And one of the questions was, why do I have to learn English? What is there for me if I learn this language? Can't I just speak Portuguese? And it's not a bilingual school. And it was the first time that I came up, that somebody came up with this, for me at least, like, why? Why do I have to? Because, my language is important. My language works. So if you had a little kid asking you this, what would you say to this?
I would say that your culture is the most important thing. So don't say, learning English is absolutely fundamental. It isn't. Her language and her culture, I'm saying her, I don't know whether their culture, their language, is the most important thing for them. At 5 or 55, intercultural awareness is about that, as I said, about talking about your culture and language. But you can do it through English, and if you do it through English, you can communicate with more people. You can spread that message to more people. But the important thing is that these people, when they ask about that, it's important they don't feel disempowered by learning English, by the obligation of learning English. Because there is no obligation. People shouldn't feel an obligation. But it is a no-brainer that English will allow you to communicate with far more people around the world and get to know more cultures. In that respect, it's very valuable in life. But it certainly isn't essential. I wouldn't ever say that.
Thank you.
One more in the back, yeah?
Hi, here. Hi.
Hello.
Hey, Ben. Yeah. I'll be brief. I know we don't have a lot of time. So we spoke a little bit about emergent language and incidental learning.
Yeah.
And it's something I've also taken note of in my years of teaching. So my question would be like, sometimes I feel like I'm not really teaching as much as I'm getting out of the way of their learning.
Yeah.
So my question would be, how do I apply this intentionally? How could I bring this into the classroom with more intentionality?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It's quite difficult to answer that in a few words. But I think it's all to do with, I think that the problem is often the lesson plan. No? What you plan for the lesson, the objectives you have, as I said, they can govern too much what you actually do in class. And you kind of stifle those opportunities that come up from emergent language. But you can anticipate moments in class. I think it's to do with anticipation. Anticipate moments or design a moment in class where you give the space over to the students so they have a little bit more agency, and then you listen to what they're saying, and you make a note, and then you think, oh, I can reformulate that for you, right? I can hear what you're trying to say, and push them a little bit, reformulate it. That is the essence of teaching. responsively or reactively and responding to emergent language. It doesn't come easily. It takes some time. But I think it's anticipating moments where you can allow them that freedom and learn from them. Yeah. See, there's a lot of people asking.
I don't know if we have time. How are we doing on time? We don't have time.
There's a man with an electric guitar approaching.
Yeah, I don't think we have.
One more, yes. This person's very keen to.
Yeah, go ahead, Serge. Go ahead. Yeah.
Hello, good night. We're from a small English school from the countryside here in São Paulo.
Yep.
And we mostly teach online. And we have a very difficult situation that happens with us, and it's about engaging our students while teaching online. We also have the presential school, the face-to-face, and we don't face the same problems. Of course, we do most of the things you said today. Most of the principles here we do follow, but sometimes we feel like we need to do a bit more.
Yeah.
So if you have any tip or...
Yeah, I mean, it is more difficult to engage students online. It's always the case. But there's a few tips I could suggest. Everyone is in their are they in their homes? Are they? When they're online with you, So the physical environment is quite interesting to explore, where you are as well. Bring in things. I don't know if you've ever done this when you're teaching online. Bring objects, things that are important. Remember I mentioned things that have value. Maybe just change the dynamic a bit, get up and find something and talk about it. A little story associated, I don't know, with a souvenir or an object or something you have, and then get students to do that. And that helps them, they work with their physical space. And I think that's one tip for engaging students. They won't expect that at the beginning. I don't know if you've ever done that, but it's a very effective way to get them engaged, working with their environment and things they have around them. The other thing for engagement, the one good thing about teaching online is personal feedback, yeah? So because of the chat, you can actually give, I think, better, more acute personal feedback than in the class, but because you chat individually to the student. So working with personal feedback is another way. You really need to give feedback. So it's so important online because students really need to know how they are doing. They may be disengaged because they're thinking, I don't know how much I'm progressing here. So personal feedback through chat is another good tip. Hope that helps. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ben.
Okay, thank you.